So while everyone is preparing for the big game, I'm doing the important stuff. I'm reading comics. It's time for another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Hit the music.
It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. Lineup for the day, we're just going to talk about my favorite books from this past week. Got my top 5. I'm going with 5 this week since we didn't have an interview to drop in. So I'm going to give you my top 5 for the week, and then we'll talk quickly about what's to come for comics coming out this coming Wednesday, February the 12th, and what I'll be reading. And so with that being said, let's jump into those comics. All right, so in the number 5 spot, we have JSA number 4, written by Jeff Lemire with art from Joey Vasquez. So this issue, part 4 of the Ragnarok storyline, it focuses on Dr. Mid-nite. And this Dr. Mid-nite, of course, is Beth Chapel, who really made her first appearance in the Stargirl television series over on the CW, and it's now been integrated into the comics. And it really builds Beth up as a very strong character. So before I talk about Beth, let me talk about the other stuff that happens. So remember, the JSA has just been under attack by the Injustice Society, and the Injustice Society has been doing a job on them. And so we see in other parts of the story, we can remember Thunderbolt and Jakeem have turned up missing. We saw at the end of last issue where the fake Obsidian, attacked and kidnapped Beth. We now find that the real Obsidian and Jakeem are being held in the same place. And while Obsidian's been able to get his power back, Jakeem has been unable to call out Thunderbolt. He's unable to call him out. And we end up seeing that the reason why is because they appear to both be stuck in Todd's mind, inside Obsidian's own mind. And so that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out, and how they're able to make their escape. But again, for me, this really was about Beth and building her up as a character. And I think Jeff Lemire did a great job in doing just that. You can tell from the main cover, you can tell from the variant covers that this was really about Dr. Mid-nite. And you could see as she is making her way through the issue and she's finding things out about the Injustice Society and what they're planning to do. You could see how she's learned so much from so many. She learned tricks of the trade from Batman. She learned how to fight from Wildcat. So she's not just a smart person wearing a pair of high-tech goggles. She is a strong character, and I think Jeff Lemire did a great job of just putting that out there to see that, when it comes down to it, she can be depended upon to do not just the smart stuff of the JSA. Now, unfortunately, by the time the issue ends, she gets her ass handed to her. But still, you can do all of that and still not turn out on the winning end, especially when you are facing the likes of Scandal Savage, who's the person that took her out. But again, really enjoyed the issue, really enjoyed how they built Beth up. I can't wait to see how the next issue turns out. and I'm really really hoping that it brings everything back full circle as we get into part 5 of the Ragnarok story arc. Now on the art side, the art is really good. I've really been enjoying it since JSA has made its return under Jeff Lemire and All In, and I can't wait to see more from Joey Vasquez once issue 5 comes out. But that is my number 5 book for the week. JSA number 4 from writer Jeff Lemire and artist Joey Vasquez over at DC Comics. In the number 4 spot, got a new series over at Boom Studios, Bronze Faces number 1, written by Shobo and Shovkoka, with art by Alex Tefinski. I hope I say his name correctly. But new series that is really just a heist when you get down to it, and it's set in England, but it's really based on Nigerian work as well. It focuses on 3 characters. It focuses on Timmy, Sanjo, and we'll just say GB. And they are lifelong friends. They grew up in the same house, especially Timmy and Sango. And Simi is invited to this museum in the UK, and they come to find, all 3 of them who are able to meet up at the museum, they come to find that this museum has taken possession of the works of art of Timmy's father. And they just, while the museum is presenting this exhibit as just a showcase of Nigerian culture, the 3 friends see it nothing more than a cultural heist, a theft of culture from Nigeria. And Sanjo and Timmy come up with the idea that they're gonna take it back. And so one night, the 2 of them break into the museum. They steal all of Timmy's dad's works of art, and you know, the highlight of it was 3 masks that Timmy's dad, made, that was really for the family. And as they are attempting to leave, they go to get one last piece. The alarm goes off. They're chased by security. And before security is able to capture them, GB shows up, and she is able to help them make their escape. And so they're now back, and they're looking at all of these items that they were able to regain and take back from the museum. And what they also find is this small box with this document. And this document turns out to be a royal document of Nigeria. And what it shows is a list of all the works of art that have been taken from Nigeria, from all over the world, by other nations, whether British, French, Spanish, whoever. And in the end, the 3 decide that they can't stop with just recouping the works of art from Timmy's dad. They have to go and they have to find everything and return it to Nigeria. And that's how the issue ends. They decide that they're going to go on this mission to retrieve all these items that have been considered stolen by the Nigerian government. And I'm excited about this story. Deep down, you just see a lot of the history of Nigeria written throughout these pages, whether it's in the designs of the mask, talking about how these masks are made and their place within the family, and it's just a wonderful story. And the heist is a part of it. The three of them getting those items that belong to Timmy's dad is part of the story. The decision to go after and try to retrieve the other stolen pieces of art, it's a part of the story, it's a part of the heist. But what's also a part of the story is just learning little bits and pieces of Nigerian history, and it's really a good story. I am very, very intrigued by what the Cokas did in their writing, and how Alex Tefinke was able to put all of that into his art, and it's just great work from all three of them. I'm definitely going to be following this story, and I strongly suggest, and if you haven't picked it up, I strongly suggest that you do so as well. But again, it's a great read. I can't wait for issue 2 to come out and to see how they actually plan on getting into these other places, because it didn't reveal whether or not they were all museums or not. It was just that this was a list of works of Nigerian art that was taken and placed elsewhere. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plan comes together with these three lifelong friends, and I'm interested to see where it goes. But again, that is my number 4 book for the week. Bronze Face is number 1 from Shobo and Shov Koka, with art from Alex Tefinke over at Boom Studios. In the number 3 spot, we have Batgirl number 4, written by Tate Brombo, with art from Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. I've been enjoying this series from the start. Absolutely love it. Love the art. This issue went really quick when it gets down to it. As you can remember, last issue, Cass met basically the team that was brought together by Shiva to hopefully bring down the Unburied, which brought back Angel Breaker, which brought back Nissa Al Ghul. And what we see in this issue is, of course, Cass still has a lot of distrust of everyone, of Shiva, of Nissa, of Angel Breaker. And she is really trying to learn what's next. And throughout the issue, she is constantly asking the question, what would Batman do? What would Batman do? Constantly relying on her training and asking what Batman would do in the situation that she's in right now, or as she gets to different parts of the issue. And it's really interesting. There's this one page, because again, she's thinking that she's gonna have to fight, and there's this one splash page where she is basically doing her thing, reading how she's gonna take out some of the individuals that are in that train car, including some of the ninjas that are there from the League, taking out Nissa, taking out Angel Breaker, and just going all out. And it's a really good sequence when you look at it from Takeshi Miyazawa. But as she is doing this and she's doing her read thing, she notices out of the corner of her eye another individual enter the train car. Turns out it's someone from the Unburied, and it's one of those undead monks who basically lights himself up and blows up the car. And that leads to just this huge fight where two of the guess grandmasters of the Unburied are coming after Shiva and Cass and taking out everybody that they can. And you see at some point Shiva and Cass get somewhat of an upper hand before Calden, the member of the Unburied from the first two issues, makes his way into the story again. And once again, Cass gets her ass handed to her by Calden. He takes her out with just a few punches, and she blacks out, wakes up, comes to find out that Shiva's been gone. The Unburied has taken her. And the issue ends with, Jayesh, that's the high priest of the Order of Shiva, who is committed to going after and finding Shiva. And as the issue ends, you see Cass jump on this motorcycle with him to take off after the Unburied. But as the story ends, she is no longer asking what Batman would do. She now asks, what would Shiva do? And the way she asks it is, what would my mother do? And so we see a lot of growth in this story, especially between Cass and Shiva. Again, there is that distrust, but you see that it's starting to chip away. You see there are parts of the issue where Shiva places a hand on Cass's shoulder, and Cass, again, they both knowing the art of reading body language, are able to know what the other person is thinking and knowing what to do next. But again, by the time the issue ends, she's no longer asking herself about what Batman would do. It's about what her mother would do, and the fact that she is acknowledging Shiva as her mother really, really is a change, in my opinion. And I'm excited to see where things go with that, because over the years, whenever there has been some type of confrontation between those two, I mean, we saw it at the beginning of this series where Cass said, I never asked for you to be my mother. I never asked for one. And now she is going after her. And so I am interested to see where this goes. Now, Donovan over at the Batman Universe is reviewing this for the site, and I know he is enjoying it from one aspect, but he has some concerns, particularly with the voices of some of the characters in this story. I don't know if I necessarily agree with all of his takes with it, but he does have some valid points. I'm hoping to get him either on this podcast or one of the Batman Universe podcasts to talk more about it, because he and we consider ourselves the biggest Cassandra Cain fans out there. And so we might have a little back and forth over how things are going with this series. But again, I'm absolutely loving it. I'm absolutely loving the art from Takeshi Miyazawa. Again, I've been getting every cover thus far for this series just because of my love of the character. The variant cover from Silver Micah is just downright beautiful. Some may be concerned because I've seen on social media where there have been some complaints about how they are depicting Cass, with how she looks and dresses and whether or not she's aged up some. I don't necessarily see that. I just see it as I see Cass as a beautiful young woman who is what she is, who she is. And again, just loving the series. I'm loving the fact that she is in the forefront. And she's in the forefront in two series now, not just with her own, but also over at Birds of Prey. But that is my number 3 book for the week. Usually it's higher than that. Both times it's before this, it was always my book of the week. But there are two books at the top of it. But my number three book for the week, Batgirl number 4 from Tate Brownbull and Takeshi Miyazawa over at DC Comics. All right, we're down to my top two books for the week. And it was really hard making the pick of my top book when it comes to these two. And I could really interchange them, because I love them for similar reasons. However, the book in my number two spot, Gatchaman, Only One Earth, number 1 from Tommy Lee Edwards and Nuno Platti over at Mad Cave Studios. I don't know if Edwards' world is within the main universe that Cullen Bunn is writing. And if it is, that's okay. And if it's not, that's even better. So in the world of Gatchaman right now, we have the main series over at Mad Cave that's being done by Cullen Bunn, and the main artist is Chris Batista. However, as the main series has been going on, there's been a few one-shots that Tommy Lee Edwards has done that focused on Ken, that focused on June. And at the same time, there was a miniseries that focused on Galactor, and specifically Burkotze, that was done by Steve Orlando. That miniseries seemed to play more into what is going on in Cullen Bunn's universe. However, it's not necessarily the case for the one-shots that Tommy Lee Edwards did for June and for Ken. And it's pretty much the same here when we look at Only One Earth. There is, of course, things going on, and Galactor is scheming, and they launched this attack that really, really causes chaos in this country that is on the verge of experiencing freedom in a very long time after the dictator uncle was finally, put out of power as his niece grew old enough to take the throne. And Burkotze and Galactor used this duke to basically make their way integrate into everything within this country. And so Ken and Joe go undercover, Eagle and Condor, and almost immediately you could see just this tension between those two. And it's something that you don't see in the main series. At least I haven't as of yet, and I've been following the main series from the start. And it's almost, I don't want to say it's a jealousy between Ken and Joe, with Ken being in the Gatchaman role. But there's this tension between those two, and it's so thick you can cut it with a knife. And if there is one thing I can say about Tommy Lee Edwards' world of Gatchaman, it is a lot more grittier than what you are seeing in the story from Cullen Bunn. And that's okay. I have no problem. I actually appreciate the different tones that you could see with both stories. I mean, and the art matches it. I mean, you could look at the cover that Edwards did. He didn't do the main art within the issue itself, but I mean, even with the main cover that he drew, it's a darker tone, it's a grittier tone. It's just, I don't want to use the word serious or more serious than what's going on in Cullen Bunn's universe, but everything about it, whether it's the dialogue, whether it's the interaction between the characters, whether it's the art, it just makes it makes it appear more dark, but not in a bad way. So I don't want to take the word dark and make it a negative word, because it's not. It's actually making me appreciate both worlds if there are actually in different universes. And if they are within the same universe, it also adds a bit of appreciation, because it makes you realize that it's not always happy go lucky, the feel that you get when reading the main series. Again, I just love it, and like I said, it was really close to being my number one book for the week, and it really could have, again, because the book in the number one spot has pretty much a lot of dark tones and grit as well, which made me really love it. But I'm just everything that's been happening with Gatchaman has just been absolutely great. And if I had to score everything, if there was a weak one, it was the Galactor miniseries. But it wasn't weak really. It just, compared to the other stories, it wasn't as good. And I'm excited to see where this goes, because when you look at it, Joe is missing. He's going after this princess to save her, as the nation that she's taken over, it's called Artrina, is just being destroyed with this chaos that Burkatsi and Galactor has caused. I mean, there's a volcano going off. There's some type of machination that's making this eruption even worse. And, Joe's nowhere to be found. I mean, we know that he's going out to save the princess, but the rest of the Science Ninja team doesn't know this. And there's this concern. And despite the tension that exists between he and Ken, you could see that Ken, as the leader, still has that concern for his teammate to risk it all and to defy the orders of Dr. Numbu to, get out of there and just ignore him to go and find Joe. And I'm just excited to see where things go next with this miniseries. Totally love it. If you have not read it, please go pick it up. Uh, Anything that's involving Gotcha Man right now, I strongly recommend. I know that Mad Cave is working on something else that's going to be announced soon. If you pass by their booth over at New York Comic Con last year, you saw that they were passing out posters regarding it. But I'm excited for this. I'm definitely gonna continue reading it. Anything Gotcha Man coming out right now is just, automatic pick and pull to my pull list for me. But that is my number two book for the past week. Gotcha Man, Only One Earth, number one, from writer Tommy Lee Edwards and art from Nuno Platti over at Mad Cave Studios. Okay, so what title was good enough that it could knock Gotcha Man out of the top spot? And again, it was really tough for me this week to pick my number one book. However, my number one book for this past week, The Ultimates, number nine, written by Dennis Camp, with art from guest artist Chris Allen over at Marvel Comics. So there are two things that's really going on in this issue. So first up, it really focuses on Luke Cage and how he gets his power back from Tony via the spear. And the other thing that's going on, and it's kind of in the background, is, if you can remember from a previous issue, the team went up against the Hulk, got their ass handed to him, and in turn, the Hulk basically kills Tony, or at least that's what he thought. So Doom places Tony in this stasis tomb, more or less, where he's not dead, he's comatose, but he's just unresponsive. Reed himself doesn't think that he'll ever wake up. But She-Hulk is watching over him, and she is really just giving her thoughts and her wishes for him to wake up, because basically he has a promise to keep. If we can remember, when she made her debut, he promised that if she helped him and helped the Ultimates take down everything that's been going on with the Maker and everything else, that he would help her and her people uh, get things together on their island back in the Pacific. So she's making him keep that promise. You know, she's making him own up to it, even though he's comatose. But the main story of this issue is on Luke Cage, and how he is how he first found himself in prison. And it was really weird. He was convicted of something he doesn't know. He was sentenced he was basically given a life sentence, more or less. The initial sentence was 1 day to life, or 1 year to life. And during this time, he is abused, much like all of the other prisoners that are in these various prisons that are owned by Midas. And he, this abuse basically helps build him into the character that he is. He's working out. He's just getting stronger and stronger by the day, until he actually meets Tony, and Tony makes his appearance in front of him, in front of the cell, where he gives him the spear which has his power. But what we see is that they've transferred Luke to this prison, and he's transferred after another prison has basically had a prison break, a riot, and it's still going on. The prisoners still have control over it. But he's transferred to this prison, and he starts to gain a following, including the likes of Danny Rand, aka Iron Fist. Now, he doesn't get his power in this issue, and he may not at all. But he starts to build a following. And as you read through the issue, what you learn is that once he gains his power and he gains a knowledge of it, Tony comes back and says, "Hey, you ready to go? We got work to do." And Luke decides, no, it's better for him to make change in prison, because again, like him, a lot of the prisoners in these prisons, in these for-profit prisons, are there for no reason. They're really illegally, and he wants to make change from within. And what we learn is, as you're going through the issue, and you hearing the stories from the prison guards of these prison breaks and these riots that are going on, you see that at each one of them, Luke Cage is behind it. And we now see he is building this following. He's building this following in the prison again. At basically, they riot. He plans it out perfectly from within for them to capture the guards and basically make the prison their own. And it's a really good issue when you look at how Dennis Camp really gives voice to Luke Cage. I mean, there were certain parts of it that gave me Black Panther vibes. And when I say Black Panther, I don't mean T'Challa. Black Panther from the days of the civil rights movement, where hey, we got to do for ourselves here. And in some instances, I even had Malcolm X vibes from Luke. He's this leader. He's quiet and calm. He stays to himself except when these group of prisoners are around him, and he's a leader. He's a leader that they listen to. So it is a really, really, really good issue. I absolutely loved it. And considering this February and it's Black History Month, it was perfectly timed with how they released this issue, to begin the month, and it fit with everything that's going on. And so I think that was just the right amount to put it over Gatchaman, only one Earth for this week, and just perfect in every way. The art from Chris Allen was really good. Just everything about it was just, yeah, it was really a chef kiss moment with how that story all played out. Now, considering everything that's going on with Luke and the prison breaks and the riots and all at the for-profit prisons, the issue ends, however, again, as I mentioned before, She-Hulk is having this conversation with Tony, who's in this stasis, telling him, you have a promise to keep. You need to wake up because you have this promise to keep. And as she walks away, the issue ends with Tony opening his eyes. And so it seems as if, despite what Reed was saying, it seems as if Tony Stark is back, and we'll see a return of some sorts of Iron Lad. But that is my book of the week for this past week. The Ultimates, number 9, written by Dennis Camp, with art by Chris Allen, over at Marvel Comics. So there you have it. My top 5 books from this past week. They come from a smorgasbord of publishers. I do have 2 honorable mentions that I want to bring up. They are both from DC Comics. First up, Birds of Prey number 18 from writer Kelly Thompson with art from Juan Cabal. Sisters Cynthia and Dinah, they're on a mission as this ninja clan is looking to capture Cynthia. I'm assuming to get control of the demon inside of her. But for me, the best part of the story is, again, the continuing interaction between Big Barda and Cassandra Cain, Batgirl. If Birds of Prey ever comes to an end, those two have to have a series together. The interaction between those two characters, between Barda and her little bat, Cassandra, is just great when you see them in action together, but also when they're just chilling. I mean, that one scene where they're playing video games and Cass is just handing Barda her butt, and Barda pays her back by simply destroying her game controller. Is just funny as hell, and I love the interaction between those two. But that's my first honorable mention. Second honorable mention, Absolute Superman number 4 from Jason Aaron with art from Rafa Sandoval. Man, that ending with Peacemaker taking out those people from the town, and the potential of retribution from Kal-El in a future issue once he finds out is going to be really, really deep. And if you read the story, you could see that one of the concerns that was mentioned is what happens if Kal-El goes over the deep end, if he's pushed too far. And we might get that answer in a soon to come issue, if not the next issue, as Kal-El deals with the aftermath of those innocent civilians being murdered by Peacemaker. But those are my two honorable mentions. Birds of Prey number 18, Absolute Superman number 4, all from DC Comics. So that is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Before heading out, let's talk about next week. So I have a few interviews lined up, not certain whether or not I'll get them all done in time to have one up for next episode. And we have a ton of books that are out next week as well. So there's just a whole bunch that I'm going to be reading. Most of them are going to be at DC. We have the premiere of Jeremy Adams doing Green Lantern Corps. We have another issue of Absolute Batman from Scott Snyder and Nick Dragotta. We have another issue of Action Comics, Action 1083 from John Ridley. And then we also have a few titles over at Marvel that I'm going to be reading. Particularly for me, it's going to be Moon Knight, Fist of Khonshu from Jed McKay. And then also, wait a minute, let me pull this up real quick. Staying at Marvel, we're going to be looking at the second issue of Magic. And then going on over to Image Comics and Skybound, we'll have the latest issue of Transformers from Daniel Warren Johnson. That's issue number 17. And then we have another issue of Geiger from Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. That's going to be issue number 11 over there with Geiger. And then lastly, as far as the highlights, we get Cam Girl number 1 from Sarah Cho over at AWA. Now, I'm looking forward to this. If you all can remember, I interviewed Sarah a while back when the series Red Light was out from AWA as well. So this is another book that's coming out from her. I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm going to see if I can get her back on the show as well so that we can talk about Cam Girl and this series that's coming out from AWA. But again, a lot of great stuff coming out. Hopefully I can get some interviews knocked out as well. I'm looking forward to talking to Marcus Williams about Ally Popeye. I'm also looking forward to sitting down and talking to Joseph Illich about the final issue of Milestone Universe, The Shadow Cabinet. The final issue is out in a few weeks. So I'm going to have him on as well, and I'm hoping I'm able to get that out to you. If not this week, more than likely it'll be the following episode. But a lot of good stuff coming out this Wednesday. Make sure you go to your local comic shop and support those guys. And I will see you all next week. Enjoy your comics. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at the BatmanUniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.